The massive station floated in the darkness of space like a jewel made of crystal and steel. Station Zenith had stood here for thousands of years, orbiting the dead star that provided its power. Inside its halls, representatives from 200 different alien species gathered for what they called an emergency meeting. The air hummed with tension as creatures of every shape and size took their places in the grand chamber. Captain Jiho Park stood at the edge of the human delegation area and watched the alien crowds with careful eyes. He wore the dark blue uniform of the United Earth Navy, and his face showed no emotion as the other species stared at him and his companions. Beside him stood Ambassador Yuna Kim, a woman whose sharp mind had earned respect even from those who disliked humanity. Chief Engineer Dae-ho Choi checked his datapad quietly while Security Officer Hannah Lee kept watch on the exits. The chamber itself was built to intimidate. Curved walls rose up like the inside of a giant shell, and holographic displays floated in the air, showing star maps and legal documents. At the center sat the High Arbiter, a alien named Velmoth, whose species had ruled the council for longer than humans had existed. His skin shimmered with colors that changed with his mood. And right now those colors showed anger. The council will come to order, Velmoth announced. His voice translated into hundreds of languages simultaneously. We gather today to address the human problem. Jiho felt Yuna's hand touch his arm gently, a silent message to stay calm. He had expected this. For months now, the council had been complaining about Earth's expansion into new territories. Humanity had been colonizing worlds in the Outer Rim, building settlements and mining operations without asking permission from the ancient powers that claimed to own the galaxy. A Threxian warrior stood up from his seat. The Threxians were a militaristic race, covered in thick armor-like skin and standing nearly 3 meters tall. This one was General Cross, commander of their border fleets. The humans violate 17 articles of the Colonial Accords, he said, his voice like grinding rocks. They terraform worlds without genetic compatibility studies. They build military stations in neutral zones. They refuse to submit their DNA for the registry that all junior species must provide. Other voices joined in, creating a chorus of accusations. The humans had moved too fast, grown too strong, acted with too much independence. Species that had taken centuries to earn a single colony world watched as Earth claimed a dozen systems in just 20 years. The old powers of the galaxy did not like this at all. Velmoth raised one of his many limbs, and the chamber fell silent. Captain Park, Ambassador Kim, you have heard the charges. The Council demands an explanation. You will answer for these violations, and you will accept the restrictions we impose. Your species is young and reckless. You need guidance from those who have maintained peace in this galaxy for 3,000 years. The chamber waited. Jiho could feel hundreds of eyes on him, some curious, many hostile. He looked at Yuna, who gave him the smallest nod. They had discussed this moment many times during the long journey to Station Zenith. Earth's leaders had given them clear instructions. Though those instructions had shocked everyone who heard them, Yuna stood up slowly and walked to the speaking platform. She moved with grace and confidence, her expression calm and neutral. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the translation systems. The delegation from Earth acknowledges that the Council has stated its concerns, she said. We have heard your accusations and your demands. The chamber leaned forward. This was the moment when the humans would apologize, when they would beg for mercy, when they would accept whatever terms the Council offered. This was how it always worked. New species came to the Council with pride, but they left with humility. The galaxy had an order, and everyone learned their place eventually. However, Yuna continued, humanity declines to answer these charges. We will not defend our actions to this Council. We will not accept your restrictions. We will not submit our genetic information to your databases. We choose instead to say nothing at all. For a moment, the chamber was completely silent. No one moved. No one breathed. The translator systems seemed to stutter, as if they could not believe what they had just processed. Then the explosion came. Alien delegates leaped from their seats, screaming in their native languages. The Threxian general roared and slammed his massive fists on his desk. Smaller species chittered and whistled in panic. The Vralian High Arbiter's skin flashed through angry reds and violent purples. "This is an outrage," Velmuth shouted. "In 3,000 years of council history, no species has ever refused to participate in proceedings. You dare to insult this body with your silence?" Una said nothing. She simply stood there, hands clasped behind her back, face showing no reaction to the chaos around her. Jiho and the rest of the human delegation stood as well, presenting a united front. They did not argue. They did not explain. They did not defend themselves. They just stood there in perfect silence while the galaxy's most powerful beings screamed at them. "General," Cross pointed one clawed finger at the humans. "This silence is an act of war. You spit on the authority of the Council. You mock the laws that keep order in this galaxy." Other delegates began calling for immediate sanctions. Cut off human trade routes. Block their colonies. Send military fleets to enforce compliance. The Varelians and Threxians had the largest armies in known space. What could one small species do against the combined might of 200 civilizations? Velmuth called for order again, though his own colors still showed rage. "Very well," he said, his voice cold and sharp. "If humanity chooses silence, then silence will be their prison. This council votes now on full sanctions against all human worlds. Blockade their systems. Allow nothing in or out. Let them reconsider their arrogance when their colonies begin to starve." The vote was quick and overwhelming. 183 species voted for sanctions. Only 12 abstained, and those were small, weak species with no real power. 5 voted against the sanctions. Their votes meant nothing against such numbers. Why? Una turned to face Velmuth one last time. She bowed slightly, not in submission, but in acknowledgement. Then she turned and walked toward the exit. Jiho and the others followed. Their footsteps echoed in the chamber as the alien delegates continued to shout and demand answers that would never come. As they passed through the doorway, Hannah Lee spoke quietly. "That went exactly as predicted," Yasuna replied, her voice still calm. "Now comes the difficult part." Behind them, the council continued their meeting, making plans to crush humanity's rebellion. They believed their blockade would break Earth's spirit within months. They believed their superior numbers and ancient technology would force the humans to crawl back and beg for mercy. They had no idea what was coming. They did not know that humanity's silence was not weakness or stupidity. It was a message, though the council was too arrogant to understand it yet. That message was simple. We will not ask for your permission. We will not play by your rules. And very soon, you will understand why your rules no longer matter. The human ship left Station Zenith without ceremony. The blockade fleets were already moving into position around human space. The trap was closing. But the council had made one critical mistake. They assumed that humans were like every other species they had dominated. They assumed that isolation would break them. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. 3 weeks after the council meeting, massive warships appeared at every border of human territory. The alien fleets were enormous. Hundreds of vessels forming an iron wall around the 17 star systems that humanity called home. Threxian dreadnoughts, each one capable of destroying a city from orbit. Varelian cruisers with weapons that could crack a moon in half. Dozens of other species contributed their own ships, creating a blockade that seemed impossible to break. No human ship could leave. No supply vessel could enter. The message from the council was clear and simple. Surrender or die slowly. On Earth, in the capital city's military command center, President Minho Kang looked at the holographic display showing the blockade. Red markers surrounded every human world like a disease spreading across the map. His advisors stood around the table, their faces showing various degrees of worry and anger. "How long do we have?" Minho asked quietly. Admiral Suni Nam, commander of Earth's combined fleets, pulled up resource projections. "Our colonies are self-sufficient for basic needs. Food, water, air, standard medicine. But we need imports for advanced medical supplies, certain rare metals, and some food varieties that won't grow on all our worlds. 6 months before we see serious shortages. 12 months before we start losing colonies." The room fell silent. A year seemed like a long time, but Minho knew it would pass quickly. Already, families on the outer colonies were worried. Ships that should have arrived with supplies were turning back, blocked by alien warships. Trade with friendly species had stopped completely. Earth stood alone against the galaxy. Tae-Jin SEO, Director of Earth Intelligence, stepped forward. He was a thin man with gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. President, I think it's time we discuss what we've been preparing for." Minho nodded slowly. "Show them." Tae-Jin activated a new set of displays, and suddenly the room was looking at intelligence reports from across the galaxy. Surveillance footage from Threxian military bases. Financial records from Vralian government databases. Communication intercepts from dozens of species. The amount of information was staggering. "For the last 10 years, Tae-Jin explained, we've had agents embedded in every major civilization. They look like the natives, talk like them, think like them. Some went through genetic modification. Others are just that good at blending in. The Council thinks we're isolated and ignorant. They have no idea how much we know about them." One of the military commanders leaned forward. "What exactly do we know?" "Everything that matters," Tae-Jin said. "Their supply lines, their political divisions, their secret conflicts. But most importantly, we know about what they've been hiding from the entire galaxy for over 1,000 years." He changed the display to show ancient ruins on a dead planet near the galactic core. The structures were massive, clearly built by a civilization far more advanced than anything existing today. Strange symbols covered the walls, and complex machinery lay half buried in the dust. "The precursors," Tae-Jin continued. "The species that built the jump gate network everyone uses for faster-than-light travel. The Council found these ruins 800 years ago. They discovered that the precursors had developed a completely different type of FTL drive. One that doesn't need gates at all. Ships could go anywhere, anytime, without using the network that the Council controls." Understanding spread through the room. The Council's power rested on one thing. They controlled the jump gates. If you wanted to travel between stars, you used their gates and followed their rules. A species that could travel without gates would be free from Council authority. "They buried the evidence," someone whispered. "Exactly," Tae-Jin confirmed. "They hid every trace of this technology because it threatened their control. But 15 years ago, a human exploration team found a different precursor site. We've been studying it in secret ever since, in hidden research facilities that the Council knows nothing about. And 3 months ago, we completed our first working prototype." The display changed again, showing a sleek human ship unlike any military vessel they had seen before. It was smaller than a standard cruiser, with unusual modifications along its hull and strange energy signatures pulsing through its core. "We call it the Cascade Drive," Tae-Jin said. "It lets a ship slip into an alternate dimension where the laws of physics work differently. You can cross 100 light years in the time it normally takes to cross a single system. No jump gates. No asking permission. Complete freedom of movement." Admiral Suni studied the ship carefully. "How many do we have?" 247 ships are equipped and ready," Tae-Jin answered. "Another 300 will be ready within 2 weeks. We've been building them in secret shipyards, in asteroid fields, and on rogue planets. The Council watches our official construction facilities, but they have no idea about these others." President Minho looked at each person in the room. These were the people he trusted most, the ones who would help him make the hardest decision of his life. If we use this technology, there's no going back. The Council will see it as an act of war, not just against their authority, but against everything they've built their civilization on. Thousands might die, maybe millions. "Thousands will die anyway if we let the blockade stand," Admiral Suni said firmly. "Our people on the outer colonies will starve. Our children will grow up as prisoners in their own homes. The Council wants us to beg, and if we beg once, we'll be begging forever." Minho turned to his intelligence director. "What about the other species? The ones who aren't part of the Council's inner circle?" Tae-Jin smiled slightly. "That's the beautiful part. There are 47 species in the Council who have no real power. They vote the way the Vralians and Threxians tell them to vote, or they face the same treatment we're getting now. They hate the system, but they're too weak to challenge it alone. If we offered them an alternative, if we showed them there's a way to be free of the gate monopoly, they might join us, Minho finished. And suddenly we're not alone anymore. The president walked to the window and looked out at the city below. Millions of people going about their lives unaware of the decision being made in this room. Children playing in parks, workers heading home to their families, all of them depending on him to choose correctly. We didn't start this fight, he said quietly. We went to the council in good faith. We tried to work within their system. They responded with arrogance and threats. They thought our silence was weakness. He turned back to face his advisors. It's time to show them what our silence really meant. We weren't refusing to defend ourselves. We were refusing to legitimize their authority over us. If they want to keep us in a cage, they're going to learn that this cage has no walls. Admiral Suni straightened. What are your orders, Mr. President? Activate Operation Silent Thunder, Minho said. Deploy the Cascade drive ships. I want one message sent to every species in the galaxy, one action that makes our position absolutely clear. We're not asking for permission anymore. We're not negotiating for our freedom. We're taking it, and anyone who tries to stop us will learn why you don't trap a species that has nothing left to lose. The orders went out within the hour. Across human space, ships that had been hiding in the shadows powered up their new drives. Crews that had trained in secret prepared for missions that would change galactic history. The blockade fleets surrounding human worlds had no idea what was about to happen. In orbit around Earth's moon, Captain Wu Jinhan checked his ship's systems one last time. His crew of 30 called themselves the Ghost Squadron, and they were about to become the most famous pilots in human history. Their mission was simple but insane: penetrate deep into Threxian space, appear above their homeworld's shipyards, and deliver a message that couldn't be ignored. All systems ready, his co-pilot reported. Cascade drive charging. Coordinates locked. Eugene looked at the stars through his cockpit window. Somewhere out there, the Threxian fleets waited, confident in their blockade. They believed humans were trapped. They were about to learn the truth. Take us through, he ordered. The ship hummed with energy, reality seemed to fold in on itself, and suddenly they were gone. Not destroyed, not hidden, just gone. The space where they had been was empty, and the blockade fleet nearby scrambled in confusion. The Ghost Squadron was already 1,000 light-years away. They were just getting started. The Council's cage was broken. Humanity was done being quiet. The Threxian homeworld of Threx Prime hung in space like a red jewel, surrounded by massive orbital shipyards that had been building warships for centuries. Defense stations dotted the system, each one armed with enough firepower to destroy a fleet. Warning satellites formed multiple layers of detection, making it impossible for anything to approach unnoticed. The Threxians had never been invaded. Not once in their 3,000 years of spacefaring history. That perfect record ended in an instant. Captain Ujinhan's Ghost Squadron appeared directly above the largest shipyard without warning. One moment the space was empty. The next, 30 human ships materialized out of nowhere. Their weapons powered down, but their presence impossible to ignore. Alarms screamed across every Threxian military frequency. Defense stations swiveled their weapons toward the intruders. Fighter craft launched from nearby carriers. Wujin opened a broadcast on every channel, making sure his message reached every ship, every station, and every government facility on the planet below. This is Captain Wujin Han of the United Earth Navy. We come not to attack, but to deliver a message. Your blockade is meaningless. Your control over faster-than-light travel is finished. The gates are not the only path through the stars. Your power is an illusion, and this moment proves it. The Threxian response was immediate and furious. Dozens of warships converged on the human position. Weapons locked on. Commanders demanded surrender. But before they could fire, the Ghost Squadron vanished again, reappearing on the far side of the system. Then they vanished and appeared near a military moon base. Then near the outer defense ring. Each time, they stayed just long enough to be seen before disappearing to a new location. The Threxians could not track them. Their sensors showed the human ships moving faster than anything they had ever recorded. Jump gates left signatures, traceable energy patterns. This new drive left nothing. The humans could appear anywhere, anytime. And the most powerful military in the galaxy could do nothing to stop them. While the Ghost, L Squadron, demonstrated humanity's new capability. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Human ships appeared in neutral zones that should have been days away. Freighters that were supposed to be trapped inside the blockade suddenly showed up at friendly ports in distant sectors. Every appearance was broadcast, recorded, and shared across galactic communication networks. The psychological impact was devastating. For 3,000 years, the Council had maintained power through one simple fact. They controlled movement. If you wanted to trade, you used their gates. If you wanted to colonize, you traveled through their network. If you threatened them, they could cut you off from the rest of civilization. That monopoly had just been shattered in a single day, on Valian Prime. High Arbiter Velmuth watched the reports with colors flashing across his skin in patterns that showed deep distress. His advisors argued amongst themselves, some calling for immediate military strikes against Earth, others suggesting negotiation. None of them had real answers. "How is this possible?" Velmuth demanded. "Our best scientists studied the precursor ruins for centuries. They said this kind of drive was theoretically impossible." His chief scientist, a Vralian named Tilmex, spoke carefully. "Perhaps our scientists were working with incomplete information. Or perhaps they were told to reach certain conclusions regardless of what the evidence showed." The accusation hung in the air. Velmuth knew what Tilmex was implying. The Council had found the precursor FTL technology and deliberately suppressed it. They had lied to their own people to maintain control. And now those lies were coming back to destroy them. While the Threxians and Vralians struggled to respond, Earth's diplomatic teams were already reaching out to the galaxy's smaller species. Yunji Quan, leading a group of negotiators, made simultaneous contact with 17 civilizations that had long been frustrated with Council rule. These were species that had been forced to accept unfair trade agreements, harsh restrictions on their expansion, and condescending treatment from the ancient powers. The message Yunji delivered was simple and revolutionary. The Cascade Drive. Technology will be shared freely with any species that renounces the Council's authority and joins the Free Trade Alliance. No more asking permission to travel. No more paying tribute to use the gates. No more accepting scraps while the old empires take the best worlds for themselves. Join us and be truly free. The response exceeded even the most optimistic predictions. Within 24 hours, 15 species announced their departure from the Council. Within 48 hours, that number grew to 30. By the end of the week, 43 civilizations had abandoned the old order and requested the specifications for humanity's new drive. The Council tried desperately to stop the bleeding. They offered reduced gate fees. They promised better representation. They made threats about what would happen to species that betrayed the galactic order. Nothing worked. Once species understood they had an alternative, once they knew the gates weren't necessary anymore, they saw no reason to stay under the Council's thumb. General Cross of the Threxian military proposed a solution that many in the Council wanted to hear. "We must make examples," he said during an emergency meeting. "Send hunter-killer fleets to destroy human ships wherever we find them. Attack the species that betrayed us. Show the galaxy what happens when you defy the Council's authority." Velmuth hesitated, but pressure from the other major powers pushed him to agree. The Council issued orders. Any human ship encountered would be destroyed on sight. Any species that had joined the Free Trade Alliance would face immediate sanctions and potential military action. The Council would not negotiate. They would not compromise. They would crush this rebellion with overwhelming force. It was the worst decision they could have made. The Threxian Fourth Fleet, 300 warships representing the pride of their military, received orders to hunt down and eliminate human vessels. They found their target near the Helios cluster, a small convoy of 12 human freighters that appeared to be traveling without military escort. The fleet commander broadcast his demand for surrender, confident that the humans would see the impossibility of their situation. This is Admiral Grek of the Fourth Fleet. You are surrounded and outgunned. Transmit the specifications for your drive technology immediately, or we will open fire. You have 1 minute to comply. The human response came from the lead freighter. This is Transport Captain Borakim. We decline your demand. We also suggest you reconsider your position. Grek laughed, a sound like stones grinding together. You have civilian cargo ships against 300 warships. What position do I need to reconsider? The one where you think these are actually cargo ships? Bora replied. The 12 freighters suddenly split apart. Not destroyed, but literally separated into hundreds of smaller craft. The outer holes had been shells. False exteriors hiding military drones equipped with weapons that the Threxians had never seen before. Each drone was small, fast, equipped with its own cascade drive. They appeared and disappeared throughout the Threxian formation. One moment a drone would materialize next to a warship, fire a burst from close range into vulnerable sections, then vanish before return fire could lock on. The Threxians tried to target them, but their weapons were designed for traditional combat where enemies stayed in one place long enough to hit. These drones didn't follow those rules. In 17 minutes, the entire Fourth Fleet was destroyed. 300 warships reduced to debris. Not a single drone was lost. The battle was broadcast live by human observers, and within hours, every species in the galaxy had seen it. The Threxians, the most militaristic civilization in known space, had just lost their elite fleet to what they thought was a convoy of civilian ships. The message was clear. Humanity wasn't just defending themselves. They were showing the galaxy that the old powers were no longer invincible. The Council's military might, which had kept order for thousands of years, meant nothing against enemies who could appear and disappear at will. On Earth, President Minho watched the reports with mixed feelings. They were winning, but the cost was growing. The destroyed Threxian ships meant thousands of deaths, warriors who were following orders from their government. This wasn't a clean victory. It was war, and war always came with blood, but there could be no turning back now. The Council had seen their monopoly broken and responded with violence. Humanity had no choice but to show them that violence would not work. The galaxy was changing, and the old order would have to change with it or be swept away completely. The destruction of the Fourth Fleet sent shockwaves through the galactic community. Some species celebrated, seeing it as proof that the old powers could be challenged. Others worried that humanity had become too dangerous, too willing to use violence. The council members themselves were divided between those who wanted revenge and those who recognized they were fighting a war. They couldn't win with traditional methods. Colonel Byung-ho Shin stood in the operations center of Earth Special Forces Command, watching feeds from across the galaxy. His teams had been embedded in Vralian and Threxian space for years, living as ordinary citizens, working normal jobs, building lives that seemed completely innocent. Now it was time to activate them. Phase 2 of Silent Thunder is go, he said quietly, into his secure channel. All teams execute. Within the next 6 hours, critical infrastructure across both empires began failing. Not military targets, but the systems that maintained everyday control. Propaganda networks that broadcast council messaging suddenly started showing suppressed information instead. Citizens saw evidence of the precursor cover-up. Documents proving their governments had hidden revolutionary technology for centuries. They saw records of deals between council leaders and private corporations. Proof that the gate monopoly had made certain individuals incredibly rich while everyone else paid. Ever-increasing fees. Surveillance systems that monitored populations for signs of dissent crashed completely. Administrative databases that tracked citizens and their activities became corrupted, wiping years of data. Financial networks glitched, revealing how council members had been embezzling public funds. None of this was random chaos. Each strike was carefully calculated to expose lies and weaken the government's grip on their own people. On Vralian Prime, protests erupted in the capital city. Thousands of citizens took to the streets demanding answers from their leaders. How long had the council known about alternative FTL travel? Why had they kept it secret? How many resources had been wasted maintaining the gate network when better technology existed? The government declared the protests illegal and sent security forces to disperse the crowds. But that only made things worse. The Threxian response was even more brutal. Their military government couldn't tolerate dissent, so they began arresting anyone who questioned council policies. Prisons filled with citizens accused of sedition. Military courts handed out harsh sentences. The empire that had seemed so strong revealed itself to be fragile. Held together by fear and strict control rather than genuine loyalty. But the council wasn't giving up. If they couldn't win through military superiority, they would hurt humanity in other ways. Varalian warships, desperate and angry, began targeting human civilian installations. They hit mining colonies with no defenses. They destroyed supply depots far from any military presence. They wanted humanity to feel pain, to understand that defiance came with consequences. The attack that changed everything happened near the border zone between human and Vralian space. The hospital ship Mercy, clearly marked with medical symbols, was evacuating refugees from a contested colony world. Aboard were 2,000 people, doctors, nurses, patients, and families fleeing from a war zone. The ship had no weapons, no military value whatsoever. It was protected by every law of civilized warfare. The Varalian dreadnought that intercepted it didn't care about laws anymore. They opened fire without warning, and the Mercy broke. Apart in seconds. Life pods launched automatically, but the dreadnought targeted those too. The massacre was complete. Every person aboard died, including Salmon Park, younger sister of Captain Jiho Park. News of the attack spread quickly. Images of the destroyed hospital ship appeared on every human news feed. The names of the dead were read aloud in memorial services across Earth. Jiho stood in his quarters aboard the Defiant and stared at his sister's photograph, trying to process a loss that felt impossible to accept. She had been a medical researcher, dedicated to helping people, as far from military service as anyone could get. Now, she was gone, murdered by an empire that claimed to represent order and civilization on Earth. The military command center fell silent as President Minho received the casualty reports. Admiral Suni slammed her fist on the table. We need to respond. Hit their capital world. Make them pay for this, and kill how many of their civilians? Taijanesio asked quietly. Start targeting cities, and we become exactly what they claim we are. They killed 2,000 of our people. Suni shouted. Unarmed refugees and medical staff? We can't let that stand. Minho looked at the reports, feeling the weight of every decision he had made. This was what leadership meant in wartime. Every choice led to death. Every strategy had a cost measured in lives. He had known this war would be bloody, but seeing the reality of it was different from planning for it. We need to end this before it spirals completely out of control, he said finally. If we keep escalating, we'll end up killing billions. Both sides will lose everything. A message came through from Captain Jiho. Despite his personal loss, he was requesting permission to address the command council. Minho approved it immediately, and Jiho's face appeared on the screen. He looked tired, older than he had just days before. But his voice was steady. Mr. President, I know what happened to the Mercy. I know my sister is dead, along with 2,000 others who should never have been targets. Part of me wants revenge. Part of me wants to see Vralian Prime burning. But that's not what we're fighting for. He paused, gathering his thoughts. When we walked out of the council chamber in silence, we made a statement. We said we wouldn't beg for our rights, but we also implied we wouldn't become tyrants ourselves. We're fighting to change a corrupt system, not to destroy civilizations. If we start massacring civilians, we're no better than the council we're trying to replace. Admiral Suni started to object, but Jiho continued. I'm not saying we shouldn't respond. I'm saying we need to respond in a way that ends this war rather than making it worse. We've proven we can't be beaten militarily. We've shown the galaxy that the old order is finished. Now we need to force the council to the negotiating table before more people die. In the silence that followed, others began to speak. Officers who had lost friends in the fighting, diplomats who had worked for years to avoid this exact situation, scientists who had developed the weapons being used, Each one acknowledged the anger and grief, but also recognized the truth in Jiho's words. Revenge would feel good for a moment, but it wouldn't bring the dead back, and it would ensure thousands more deaths to come. President Minho made his decision. We go with precision strikes against military targets only. No attacks on civilian infrastructure, no revenge killings. And we prepare one final demonstration of our capabilities, something big enough that the council has no choice but to negotiate. He looked at each person in the room. We're going to end this war, but we're going to end it in a way that lets us build something better afterward. The galaxy needs a new system, and we can't build that on a foundation of mass murder. Plans began forming for what would become the final operation of the war. It was risky, potentially costly, but it offered a path forward that didn't require destroying entire civilizations. Humanity had shown they could win through force. Now they needed to show they could win through wisdom. Captain Jiho returned to his duties aboard the Defiant, carrying his grief but not letting it consume him. He thought about Salman, about all the others who had died, about the Threxian and Vralian soldiers who would never go home. War had a cost, and that cost was always paid by people who didn't deserve to die. But if they could end it now, if they could create something better from these ashes, maybe those deaths would mean something. Maybe the galaxy that emerged from this conflict would be one where hospital ships weren't targeted, where species weren't forced to submit to ancient powers, where freedom was a right rather than a privilege granted by those who controlled the gates. It was a slim hope, but it was the only one worth fighting for. Station Zenith hung in space exactly as it had months before, when the humans had walked out of the council chamber in silence, but everything else had changed. The station was surrounded now by warships from dozens of species. Some loyal to the old council, others aligned with humanity's free trade alliance. The tension was thick enough to feel across the vacuum of space. Captain Jiho Park stood on the bridge of the Defiant, leading a fleet of 50 human ships that approached the station slowly and deliberately. Every species in the galaxy was watching this moment. Some expected a battle. Others hoped for peace but didn't believe it was possible. The wounds were too deep, the anger too fresh, the deaths too many. All ships hold position, Jiho ordered when they reached weapons range. The fleet stopped, not advancing, but not retreating either. They simply waited, a statement of confidence rather than aggression. Inside the council chamber, High Arbiter Velmoth and what remained of his government prepared for what they assumed would be humanity's demands for surrender. The old Varelian's colors showed exhaustion and defeat. Half the council seats were empty now, abandoned by species that had joined the alliance. The Threxian delegation was smaller too, their empire fractured by internal rebellion after the destruction of their fleet. Then, Jiho's face appeared on every screen in the chamber, and simultaneously on communication networks across the entire galaxy. He wasn't broadcasting just to the council. He was speaking to every citizen of every species, making sure his words reached beyond governments and politicians to the ordinary people who would live with whatever came next. "My name is Captain Jiho Park of the United Earth Navy," he began, his voice calm and clear. "Months ago, humanity stood in this chamber and chose silence when asked to defend our actions. Many of you saw that silence as an insult. Some saw it as weakness. I'm here now to explain what it really meant." He activated a display showing documents, communications, and evidence that Earth's intelligence services had gathered over years of secret operations. The Galactic Council has ruled for 3,000 years based on a lie. They told you the precursor civilization left behind only the jump gate network. They said faster-than-light travel was impossible without those gates. They maintained this fiction to control movement across the galaxy, to decide who could trade with whom, who could expand and who couldn't. The evidence began scrolling across screens. Archaeological reports from precursor sites that had been classified and hidden. Scientific papers proving alternative FTL was possible, papers that had been suppressed. Financial records showing how council members profited from the gate monopoly, while everyone else paid increasing fees. But the precursors left behind more than gates, Jiho continued. They developed a drive system that makes gates obsolete. The council found this evidence 800 years ago and buried it. They destroyed careers of scientists who questioned the official story. They maintained their power by making sure no one knew there was an alternative. Murmurs spread through the chamber and across the galaxy. Some of this information had leaked during the conflict, but seeing it all laid out comprehensively, with proof and documentation, made it undeniable. Humanity didn't refuse to answer the Council's charges because we were arrogant, Jiho said. We refuse because we don't recognize your authority to make those charges. You built your power on lies and suppression of knowledge. You claimed to maintain peace and order, but you really maintained control. When we discovered the truth about precursor technology, we knew we had a choice: ask permission from a corrupt system, or build something new. Velmuth tried to interrupt, but Jiho's broadcast couldn't be stopped. It was going out on frequencies and networks that the Council no longer controlled. We chose to build something new. And yes, that choice led to war. People died. Good people who didn't deserve it, soldiers following orders, civilians caught in crossfire. My own sister was killed when a Varalian ship destroyed a hospital ship carrying refugees. Giho's voice cracked slightly, the first emotion he'd shown. I could demand revenge for that. I could ask for blood to answer blood. But that's not what humanity is fighting for. We're not trying to replace one empire with another. We're trying to create something better. The display changed to show the Free Trade Alliance Charter, a document that outlined principles of genuine equality between species. No single civilization would control essential infrastructure. Technology would be shared openly. Disputes would be resolved through democratic processes rather than military force. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The Cascade Drive specifications are being released to every species in the galaxy right now, Jiho announced. Free of charge.
No strings attached. Anyone can build these ships. Anyone can travel anywhere without asking permission. The gate monopoly is finished, whether the Council accepts it or not. In his private office on Vralian Prime, Velmuth watched the broadcast with colors that showed resignation. His advisors argued about how to respond, but he knew the truth. It was over. The Council's foundation had crumbled. They could keep fighting, but they would lose everything. Or they could accept the new reality and try to salvage what they could. However, Jiho continued, humanity doesn't want endless war. We're offering terms. The Galactic Council will be dissolved. A new Galactic Assembly will be formed, with democratic representation based on population rather than military power. Those responsible for war crimes, including the attack on the Mercy and other civilian targets, will face justice in neutral courts. In exchange, we offer a path forward where former Council species can join the new order as equals rather than as conquered enemies. Yunji Quan, who had been leading diplomatic efforts throughout the conflict, appeared alongside Jiho. We've been in contact with moderate factions within the Vralian and Threxian governments. They understand that the old system is finished. They're willing to work toward a new arrangement that doesn't require more death. The choice now belongs to the hardliners who want to keep fighting a war they can't win. The broadcast ended, and the galaxy held its breath. For 3 days, nothing happened. Then, slowly, responses began coming in. Minor council members announced their support for the assembly proposal. The Threxian military government collapsed as regional commanders declared independence from the central authority. On Vralian Prime, mass protests forced Velmuth to resign, and the provisional government opened negotiations with Earth-Dot. It took 3 months of tense diplomacy, during which several small conflicts still occurred as hardliners refused to accept defeat. But gradually, the pieces fell into place. The Council formally dissolved itself. Station Zenith was renamed and converted into the headquarters of the new Galactic Assembly. Representatives from nearly 300 species gathered there, no longer divided into major powers and junior members, but meeting as equals. The transition wasn't smooth. Old resentments remained. The Vralians and Threxians, though reformed, harbored bitterness about their fallen empires. Some species worried that humanity would become the new dominant power, just replacing one tyrant with another. There were arguments, disputes, and moments when it seemed like the whole thing might collapse, but it didn't collapse. Slowly, carefully, a new order took shape. The Precursor Heritage Foundation was established, dedicated to finding and sharing all remnants of the ancient civilization, rather than hoarding them. The Cascade Drive became standard technology across the galaxy, ending the monopoly that had defined galactic politics for millennia. President Minho Kong's final act before retiring was to sign the Silent Protocol into Earth's constitution. It stated clearly that humanity would never claim superiority over other species, never attempt to control essential galactic infrastructure, and never suppress technology for political gain. If Earth broke these principles, any Alliance member could call for intervention. Captain Jiho Park visited his sister's memorial on Earth before taking command of a new assignment. He stood before the wall where her name was engraved alongside 2,000 others who died on the Mercy, and thousands more who fell during the conflict. "We did it, Soman," he said quietly. "We changed things. It cost too much, and I'm not sure the price was worth it. But the galaxy is different now. Maybe better. I hope so." At the first session of the Galactic Assembly, Ambassador Yuna Kim addressed the gathered representatives. She acknowledged that humanity's silence at the Old Council had been seen as an insult, and perhaps it was. But sometimes, she explained, the most powerful statement is refusing to participate in an unjust system. "We chose to speak through action rather than words," she said. "We showed you that the cage you lived in had no real walls, just the illusion of walls maintained by those who benefited from your belief in them. Some of you hated us for breaking that illusion. Others thanked us. Most of you probably felt both." She looked around the chamber at the diverse collection of species, from the massive Threxians to tiny insectoid beings barely visible in their hover platforms. "We're not asking you to love humanity. We're asking you to work with us toward something better than what came before. We made mistakes. We'll make more. But we'll make them together, as equals, rather than as subjects of an empire that lied to us for centuries." The Assembly's first major act was establishing the Memorial Worlds Project. 7 uninhabited planets were designated as living monuments to everyone who died during the conflict, regardless of species. Gardens were planted, monuments built, and names recorded. It was a reminder that freedom had a cost, paid by people who never wanted war, but ended up caught in it anyway. Far from Earth, in the depths of a distant nebula, a human exploration vessel discovered another precursor site. Dr. Hanyul Yoon, leading the research team, studied the ruins carefully. She found data archives that might contain information about where the precursors went and why they disappeared. It was the kind of discovery that could reshape understanding of galactic history. In the old days, the Council would have classified this immediately. The information would be hidden, controlled, released only in ways that benefited those in power. Hanul didn't even consider that option. She sent her findings directly to the Galactic Assembly's public database, where every species could access it freely. Some civilizations would always try to hoard knowledge and power. Some would always look for ways to dominate others. But now there was an alternative, a system built on transparency rather than secrets. It was fragile, imperfect, and constantly challenged. But it existed, and that existence proved something important. The galaxy's old order had claimed that control and hierarchy were necessary for peace. Humanity had proven them wrong, not because humans were special or superior, but because they were willing to risk everything to show that another way was possible. They had refused to beg for their rights. They had refused to accept that power should rest with ancient empires, simply because those empires were old. Their silence at the Council had been a promise. "We will not play by your rules." We will build something better, and we will burn down your empire of lies to do it. The promise had been kept, though the cost had been high. The galaxy was changed, and there was no going back. The gates still existed, still worked, but they no longer represented the only path forward. Every species, no matter how small or new, had the same freedom of movement. As the ancient powers dot, it wasn't perfect. It wasn't paradise. But it was a start, and sometimes a start is all you need to change everything.